Well, Turkey isn't the only country that the U.S. name-dropped in the successful mission against al-Baghdadi, as Sarafut said. Let's get Ross Cullen now. He joins us from Moscow. Hi, Ross. It's good to see you. Russian state media, from what we understand, says the country's Ministry of Defense says it's unaware it had provided assistance to the U.S. In the mission against al-Baghdadi, as President Trump claimed. Moscow would obviously be happy about al-Baghdadi's death, but can you clarify if Russia was involved? And what is the Kremlin saying?
Well, there seems to be 2 points of view that have been laid out over the past few hours, Reagan, since the announcement by President Trump. And we've heard from the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Federation Council, that's Russia's upper house of parliament, Konstantin Kosachev, saying that on one hand, the elimination of a terrorist must be welcomed. Islamic State has been deemed a terrorist organization by Russia. It is banned in Russia. And the destruction of Islamic State seems to be one of the only major points in which all the players in Syria have united over the past few years. They're all united in their opposition to Daesh. So on one hand, Russia does see that as a welcome news, the elimination of a terrorist. But on the other hand, Mr. Kosachev says we've heard that this man has been eliminated several times before. The US has claimed previously in airstrikes in Raqqa, for example, that Baghdadi has died, only for the news to be proved false. He also says that you need a more coherent, a wider strategy for a proper dismantling of a terrorist organization, rather than simply eliminating some of its leaders in targeted hit strikes here and there from time to time. It needs to be a deeper policy to dismantle a terrorist organization. We've heard from the Ministry of Defense, however, the other point of view saying that we were unaware of this. This operation wasn't carried out with Moscow's official approval. Now, that might be a slight disconnect between how Russia wants to see the conversation it had with the US before this operation was carried out and what Russia wants to see as its public portrayal of that conversation. Russia would not want to be seen as fully 100% acting with the US in carrying out these targeted hit strikes, if indeed, however, on the other hand, it did open up that Syrian airspace, over which, of course, it has control through its alliance with Bashar al-Assad. So we have seen the positive news from some elements of the Russian political structure saying that, yes, of course, this is a good thing if it is proved to be correct. It was also throwing doubt on the positive identification that Mr. Trump said he had of the body. Of course, if Abu Bakr al Baghdadi did indeed detonate a suicide vest, that could make positive identification of the body tricky, despite the fact that Mr. Trump said he had DNA positive proof of that. So there's been some mixed reactions coming out of Russia this evening after Mr. Trump's announcement.
That's a fascinating point, that Russia might not want to be seen as an ally in the US in their missions. But refresh our memories then. Where do the US and Russia not stand as it pertains to their presence in Syria?
Well, of course, they are, if you like, as I mentioned, indirect allies in a way when it comes to the dismantling of Islamic State. They both want to see that goal achieved. But the Russian Defense Ministry was saying just yesterday how it's characterizing the US as bandits. That is in reference to what's going on in northeastern Syria with the oil fields. Russia says it has proof that the US has been taking oil out of that part of northeastern Syria over the border into Iraq under oil trucks under the guard of US Special Forces and US private military contractors. That is in opposition to what Russia sees. It sees itself as the only legal actor, the only actor inside Syria that has a legitimate claim to be there. Through many decades of diplomatic relations with Syria, it has a naval base in Syria, it has an air base in Syria, and so overall it still does not want to see the US. It sees the US action as illegal if it is indeed removing oil from those oil fields that Russia sees eventually should come back under the auspices of the Assad government. And Russia has been enjoying, if you like, more of a limelight recently when it comes to that area in northeastern Syria with the US withdrawal. It's really taken ownership of that area and ownership of the diplomacy around that area, as we saw the deal with President Erdogan on Tuesday last week in Sochi when it comes to the extension of the 6-day ceasefire with reference to Operation Peace Spring. So Russia's been playing more of a role. It's been enjoying more of a solidifying of its role as the major power broker in Syria, but it still does not see eye to eye with the US and what it sees as bandit actions characterized on Saturday with reference to what the US appears to be doing with the oil in northeastern Syria.
Russ, you make some phenomenal points, a great analysis. We're really glad you're following this story for us. Thanks again. That's Russ Collin from Moscow.